Hi, everybody.
They don't want you to know the truth.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me again for the second episode of Disrupt the Chaos. I'm Rosa Clemente, and every Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, we will be here at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to bring you incredible artists, organizers, and activists. We are streaming live on Facebook, Instagram, Periscope, and YouTube. And our goal with this show is to bring you the voices of so many amazing organizers, activists, and artists. So first, I just wanted to drop a couple of where we're at currently at this moment with numbers. As of today, there are over 96,000 people in the United States of America that have died of COVID-19. Over 5 million in the world are infected right now. And you know, this really bothers me, what I'm about to tell you. And you'll know why if you understand the Black radical tradition or civil rights or Black power movements in this country. Montgomery, Alabama, the mayor just was on CNN saying they have run out of ICU beds, that they will begin to making choices in the hospital of who gets a bed when they begin to open up. Also, half of jobs that have been lost, mostly for African-American, Latinx, Latina people, will never come back. And we also saw a report from Columbia University that said if the president had put in social distancing even a month earlier, 35,000 lives in the United States could be saved. So we're soon, probably by tomorrow, unfortunately, to hit over 100,000 deaths. The epicenter is still in New York, but demographically, the epicenter now is in Navajo Nation, who are going through catastrophic deaths and illnesses right now. And today, 45, because I don't like to say his name, went to Michigan to a General Motors plant where their rule is you cannot go into the plant without wearing a mask. So, of course, he didn't wear a mask. And when a reporter asked him why he didn't wear a mask, he said, because I'm not going to give the media or the liberals what they want to see. I mean, like, we already know this dude's a maniac, you know, but I think it's critically important that we keep building within ourselves how much of a maniac and evil person this is in his administration. But I did want to just, before we get to our incredible guest tonight, want to talk a little bit about mental health. May is Mental Health Month. And I've been really following reporting from Politico and some other particularly Latina journalists who are writing about the toll that mental health is having on people in this time. You know, even in the quote best of times in the United States of America, half the population deals with a mental health illness at least once in their lifetime. And I'm one of those people. You know, it took me very long to admit that I was dealing with mental health issues from trauma from my childhood and even as an adult. And I had written an article in 2012 when Chris Lighty, who was really known in the hip hop community, incredible manager for so many hip hop artists, but also everybody who knew Chris knew he was just a good person. So when he had committed suicide, unfortunately, even in that time, which was 2012, there were so many, particularly African-American brothers in hip hop who were like, there's no way he killed himself. Somebody killed him. His wife shot him. And it was too hard for them to wrap their mind around mental health. But luckily now in 2020, and because of just fabulous organizers and activists, younger organizers, activists, and artists, when I mean younger, like 16 to 35, who are very comfortable at least with saying, I do have a mental health issue. No, I do go to a therapist. No, I tried that med and I didn't work. So I hope that everybody, reads the article. It is almost 8 years old, but I still think it's instructive. And unfortunately, those of us who have mental health issues now are dealing with anxiety and panic. I had written a Facebook post a couple of days after New York went into this pause lockdown, and I had a horrible panic attack. And I actually cannot really leave my house because of the mask. Like once I put it on, I'm already panicking and having anxiety. But I also know that I have to leave the house, especially now that it's nice to walk and deal with my physical health. But I'm finding it very difficult. So I hope that people out there who are like, is this supposed to be normal? No, it's not supposed to be. And unfortunately, I feel bad for children who are asthmatic, right? Like there are asthmatic people who now have to put on a mask. With that said, I did want to show just the incredible ingenuity of artists and people. This is an organization in Puerto Rico. So I actually got my mask today. See? That's the Puerto Rican nationalist flag. And then I got this one. And the black and white represents the distress that our island has been on post Hurricane Maria. So I'm going to try tomorrow to do this, but I'm really feeling for everybody out there who is finding that difficult. And I think we have to stay vigilant that the after effects of this pause or lockdown have led people to commit suicide. 2 nurses today were told, I was watching a report from NPR, had committed suicide last night, one in their car. And to all the healthcare workers and everybody who's considered an essential worker, people like us are with you. And, feel free to email us at disruptthechaos@gmail.com. Give us tips. Let us know how you're dealing with it. Give us advice. When they say we're all in this together, they're not including us. But when we say, or as Movement for Black Lives says, so I could get to our guest, says, who keeps us safe? We keep us safe. So with that, I want to bring in Lumumba Bandele and Monifa Bandele. So we're going to talk about a lot of things. So there's Lumumba and there's Monifa. Hey. My sister's going to be like, I told you not to look down, but I didn't get the teleprompter I have working today. And I just want to really give a little bit of both of your biographies. Lumumba Bandele is a father, husband, longtime community organizer, and educator from Central Brooklyn. Lumumba currently serves as the National Strategies and Partnership Director at the Movement for Black Lives. Lumumba was born into the Black Liberation Movement, with his parents being central members of Brooklyn's historic organization, the East. And there's a book, and I'm going to try to see if Jess will find it before the end of the show, that traces the history of the East. And Lumumba also co-founded the Black Youth Liberation Organization, where the organization successfully led campaigns to establish the school's first Black Studies class and remove the Air Force ROTC. In 1991, Lumumba traveled to South Africa and was able to meet with Nelson and Winnie Mandela. And currently, Lumumba serves on the board of the Center for Constitutional Rights and the Caribbean Cultural Center African Diaspora Institute, founded by a mentor to many of us, Dr. Maita Moreno Vega. And Monifa Bandele is the Senior Vice President for MomsRising.org. Monifa Bandele has spent more than a decade of experience in policy analysis, communication, civil engagement organizing, and project management. Monifa sits on the steering committee for Communities United for Police Reform, is an activist with the Movement for Black Lives, and helped launch 2 successful legal cases against police misconduct, the Daniels versus NYC, which is Ron Daniels, and they saw Floyd versus NYC. That is the court ruling that struck down finally after 11 years, the stop and frisk or some of us call them the jump out boys. If people followed the Amadou Diallo trial such a long time ago, they would have known that that's what led us to work around ending stop and frisk, which was a policy of the police department, and has conducted numerous Know Your Right workshops for thousands of communities and worked to pass landmark police reform legislation in New York City. So that's their bios. But look, I know them as Lumumba and Monifa, how the two of the dopest organizers get married and stay married. That is my first question. I want to know how two incredible people make that relationship work. Because I feel like you're the only ones that have done it and are in the past 20-year phase. So I need to know about that.
Prayer.
You let Monifa talk?
Yeah, that's how it works. Go ahead, Monifa.
That's how it works. No, we have a lot of wonderful relationships around us, including yours, Rosa, that we look to and lean on for support. How do we make it work? I think that what's important is to, set your own expectations, and not have those set outside of your family and outside of your relationship. I think that's really key. I know cliche-ish, people say communication is key, but it's really very true. Like, you have to have a good open line of communication.
Right. Lumumba.
Lots of prayer. Lots of no, seriously, no. It's I don't know. I think it helps because we were and we still are very good friends. I think we have a real solid friendship, and we enjoy being, with and around each other. And that may sound cliche-ish, but I think that helps, yeah, and I think community, we come from a lot of people who support, love us, and, people help provide a space where, it's supportive. So that's always helpful as well. But yeah, ditto to what Monifa said. I mean, you can't allow, and oftentimes it is religious text and or leadership that tells you what your marriage should look like and should not look like. And that's a recipe for disaster. So do you.
Yeah. And have two amazing daughters, Naima and Adasa. I have to say, every time I think of your wedding, it's literally the wedding from Coming to America. Because they were just showing today. I scrolled and I was like, that's exactly what their wedding looked like. Look, folks, not luckily, I wish we had cell phones, but let me just say that when this wedding ceremony began, the party was lit. There was no room on the dance floor. And I was like, this is the closest I will get to a wedding, period. So I think that's important in these times. I'm like, the thing that works with my relationship with Justice is that he's not supposed to be here, and he's here all the time, and I love him, but I'm like, dude, you're messing with my flow. I got a whole day. I know exactly what's supposed to happen when he went to work and when Alicia went to work, and now they're both up in here, and probably they don't like me, and I'm like, why are y'all here? Now we're all together. But I really want to get from all the work that you both have done, if you could speak to what's happening with this hyper police brutality. Like, the NYPD is like extra rogue right now, and there is no consequences for them. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give, and what do we need to be doing more to stop this?
Yeah, it'd be really great if people who are experiencing like this social distancing policing to definitely reach out to us. We're trying to compile examples and data that show that right now the NYPD is basically in violation of the Floyd decision, right? You talked about Floyd striking down the practice of stop and frisk as being unconstitutional. Well, it's happening again, because the only people being stopped are the only people being policed around social distancing is in our communities, right? And when you go other places, you see the police doing things like handing out masks or just letting people congregate in the park and on the sidewalk. And we see that as being racial profiling for what it is. So definitely please reach out either through Rosa, or you can find Lumumba or myself on Facebook, because we are going to start to take some action around this violation.
Mm-hmm. And I'll add also that I think it's important to continue to document these things when you see it. You know, one of the things we continue to say is that COVID didn't create these dynamics, it exposed them. And so police misconduct, harassment, brutality, the militarized policing of our communities was deadly before COVID. And so it's now compounding these pre-existing kinds of conditions. And so, you know, the cop watch that we were doing before, in some cases, some was able to prevent some of these things. Now police are so just blazing that they will do it regardless of cameras being on them. But it's important to document these stories, to document these events, so that we actually have the ability to provide our narrative, right? We know that the stories without our narrative will end differently, right? Walter Scott's killing would not have been what we know it to be now had that not been documented. The same with Eric Garner, the same with all of these other ones. So we need to make sure that we document, and hopefully in many cases, if we are doing it correctly, we are preventing the loss of life. But at the very least, we're documenting just to prove what we have been saying for decades, that this is our reality and that we will continue to fight back, you know, against it.
I want to add a little tidbit, because I remember a cop watch that Rosa was on with us back in the early 2000s. And it was someone in a building being arrested by the police. And luckily the footage that she captured on her camera actually showed the police officers planting something. You know, it wasn't made out of food, they were planting something. I don't know if she remembers that. That's the early People's Justice 2000 days.
That was just his brother Herman.
Yeah,
that was just the brother. Right.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's my husband's brother, who unfortunately is in Sing Sing right now and giving us information, but we haven't heard from him in a week because they said they were putting them on lockdown because people had died. But that was Herman, and I had just moved to Flatbush, Brooklyn, and had a video camera. And the first people I called were both of you, like, yo, I got, like, dude was literally planting the gun on him, you know, but.
So, you know, all that to say is, like, we know these things. No one listening who are your audience members or who are members of our organizations are surprised, but we're able to document that. And we want to keep doing that so that we can file these actions in court and so that we can hold some of these lawmakers accountable. Yeah.
I mean, imagine if we didn't do that, how much worse it would be. Right? Like, you know, all that work around them having cameras, it really doesn't matter when they turn them off. But I always say, what if Malcolm X grassroots movement wasn't around? Where would we be? But when I look at all the work around police violence and brutality, you know, for all of us, and I say all of us who did this work in New York City, Richie Perez was our mentor. And I think the reason the work around New York City police violence is so well respected and documented is also because Richie was the person to say, wait a minute, no matter the politics or the families have to be front and center, and we have to be there to support what the families want. Because what you end up finding is, until a tragedy strikes like this, most people really don't understand policing. So, you know, I always thought, like, Richie was 100% right. You know, the families lead the way. What did you think about that when we were doing it at an early stage? I felt sometimes I was like, no, you're not supposed to like the police. But then I had to respect the relationship that some of these mothers have with the police in their community.
Yeah, I think it's real important because it's also a reality check. Because sometimes, you know, and Sekou Odinga reminds us this often, that sometimes we can consider ourselves or think that we are so advanced that we become too far ahead of the people. Right. And the language that we use, our approach, our strategy sometimes is missing the mark because we are not where the people are. And so the families are really it. That's ground zero. That's where they are. These people did not ask to be politicized. These people did not ask to get into a battle to get justice for their children. They're not asked to get into a position where they're trying to change policing policies. They didn't ask for any of that, right? They're trying to live their lives. But here they are now, and I think that is a really just opportune time to really look at where our people are and how we actually need to create a process to help not necessarily just move them, but educate them and create a real more effective way of political education, political growth, and analysis. And so, yeah. Mhm.
Monifa, what do you think about that? I mean, the thing too is that when Richie was around, well, you were already had Naima and Adasa, but I hadn't had Alicia yet. And now, we navigate things as a mother as well in our intersectionality around that. And I'm so humbled by the fact that when this happens to a mother, all the mothers are coming together in New York City. How do you feel not only as a mom, but to see that for 20 years, these moms and dads and family have stayed showing up for other families?
Yeah, this has really grown a movement. Richie as an architect of kind of building and organizing around families brought us to the point where we could win this Floyd case in court and where we could pass Community Safety Act in New York City Council. Like the movement had become so strong and so broad because there's connective tissue between all of the different families from all over the city who have been impacted by police violence. And so it's key. It brings power, and it's important for activists to really listen to what Lumumba is saying. Is like, the families must lead, one, because wherever they stand politically, whether we feel like they're on the same page as us, it will sharpen you. It will sharpen us as activists, right? Yeah. To understand the complexities, what people think they need in their communities to keep them safe. Us coming with our agenda and our analysis that we keep us safe, and even that bumping up together, it sharpens us. So it's going to make us better in the long term. And so in many ways, they're leading us politically and training us.
Right.
That's an important dynamic. And yeah, the moms continue to show up. I always, when people ask me about why they're so important, I think back to the stories and how we were taught about Emmett Till, right? Mm-hmm. There weren't video cameras during that time. There weren't cop watches. But Mamie Till says, I'm going to put on display my pain and my horror. People actually struggle with her. No, close the casket. Don't have an open casket. And she says, no, I will not go silently into the night. She says, I'm going to have an open casket. I'm going to have Ebony and Jet and all the national magazines, and people will line up and they must see this horror that's being committed. And that takes a huge amount of strength and courage, and also leadership. And so that's how I see Gwen Carr. That's how I see Constance Malcolm. They refuse to close the casket. They're like, I want justice. I don't want you to feel good. I want everyone to feel comfortable. I want everyone to feel uncomfortable until I get justice for my child. And there's no more moral assenter than that.
Yeah, I mean, it's heartbreaking to see, but then when you are around these mothers and family members like Nicholas Haywood, whose son was killed and recently passed away, you're like, no, that's what the grassroots mean. It's not leadership top down, it's bottom up, and that's
together.
Really important. And one day we'll all hopefully be writing or contributing to the particular history of the Malcolm X grassroots movement. When we were doing that work and when it wasn't popular and there weren't a lot of cameras around for what we were doing. So Monifa, I know with Moms Rising that you also have been working on maternal health. Yeah. And I'm actually shocked that in these last 2 months of coverage, there has not been a story done around how do you have a baby in a global pandemic? First, as a white woman, how that's happened, but particularly as African-American women and Latina women, but African-American women have such high deaths of maternity deaths, and I'm like, if it was bad when this was good, what does that look like now? And what have you been hearing?
Yeah, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of confusion. Also, the protocols have changed in states maybe 3 or 4 times. In New York at first, you couldn't bring anyone with you to deliver when the pandemic first hit. Then they said you could bring one person, but you could only pick your doula or your partner. And then they went back on that. So first, it's so much uncertainty that anxiety you talked about. You said when you go outside, putting on the mask makes you panic. Imagine what our pregnant sisters are dealing with something that's already a really scary situation. So we have amazing, I always say that Black women are like, the patient and the doctor, right? Like impacted by these issues and also solving these issues. And so here in New York, we have Ancient Song Doula Services, which is like this huge network of Black doulas that have set up this process to train the nurses and other people in the hospital and partners who are going in virtually on how to be doulas, how to advocate to make sure that Black mothers aren't dying and experiencing severe morbidity. So, you have stuff like that. And you, of course, have your frontline midwives and also Black OBGYNs who are trying to change these policies. So the maternal health situation nationally, like you said, it was bad before we went into the pandemic. There was a piece of federal legislation that was introduced way back in early March. Now it seems like a long time ago, but it actually wasn't a long time ago, called the Momnibus, to specifically address this issue. And so it didn't go away, but it's one of those things where the pandemic has overshadowed it. But right beneath the surface, right behind the headlines, the activists, the midwives, the doulas are still fighting to make birthing safe for basically all women in the United States. Because actually the US has a bad maternal mortality rate, even when you separate out the Black maternal health crisis.
Yeah. And, with that, I feel like we should be acknowledging more, talking about more the fact that Black women are the least believed when they go into a hospital with anything else, right? And
Oh yeah, one thing I really meant to say earlier, that the data around the Black maternal mortality disparity, 3 to 4 times more likely to die, that's even when you control for things like income, education, all those things that try to say, oh, well, of course it's a higher rate because, Black women are poorer, they're sicker or less educated. Well, the data that the CDC pulled controlled for that, right? So it's comparing white women with a high school education who have a certain amount of health with Black women who have a high school education, certain amount of health and income, and saying still, when you go all the way up, higher level of income, higher level of education, Black women are still experiencing a higher mortality rate. And that's why you see even someone like Serena Williams,
I know,
believed when she says, I just had a baby and you need to scan my lungs because I'm basically dying right now.
Yeah, and they didn't want to do
that.
Yeah. And she would have died if she didn't have her husband partner there. And, for folks that might not know, especially a lot of us are now or will know friends who are encountering the health system in hospitals, that every hospital has a patient advocate. They don't like to announce it or let people know. And, my personal experience around me being pregnant with my daughter, Alicia, I had been pregnant right before, and I had a disease that no one really talked about. And it's only really been researched the last 4 years. It's a disease called hyperemesis. And in fact, when the first child I was carrying miscarried, it was Monifa who came to my apartment just to show me mad love from everybody, because I had met justice and I was happy. I was ready to have a baby. And I was so sick, and everybody kept saying, well, that's just your morning sick. And I'm like, well, I'm sick in the morning, the afternoon, at night when I sleep, But by the time I got pregnant with Elise, I knew a little bit more about this disease. And now, because the Princess of Wales or whoever in London, that I don't even really know her name, the one that's going to be the queen, had the disease in early pregnancy, and she was able to speak about it, but also surrounded by the best healthcare in the world, and I've encountered people now who were like, no, I had that too, and everybody in my crew was like, sip some lavender tea. I'm like, I cannot, tea is not helping me, people.
Right.
I was like, I don't need no ginger. I'm just going to be sick the whole time. I mean, I was so sick with my daughter that my little sister, who's helping us right now, Janita, was like, well, come live with us so we could take care of you. And she did. But I remember there was one night where 3 times that same doctor came in and kept saying, you need to have an abortion. You're not going to make it. You're not that strong. And it was my husband who was like, she's fine. She's going to make it. And he was like, babe, you can do this. Right. So all of our pregnancies are not these fairy tale pregnancies, is a little point of that. But
I wanted to add one thing too, Rosa, because, you pointed out that the COVID mortality disparity around for Black people and for Indigenous folks, we see the same thing mirrored in maternal mortality too. I would be remiss to not include the fact that Indigenous women are also experiencing high levels of maternal mortality on par with Black women. So you and I, we share that with our Indigenous sisters, and it's so interesting that you see that parallel in this case, and they tell the same stories, not being listened to, having these rare illnesses that go undiagnosed, right? That's because the care provider is not listening. And that's what we experience all the way through.
Yeah, I mean, it's important for people to know this because this is a hard time. And shout out to every doula out there.
Yeah.
I'm reading Facebook posts every day where somebody's getting trained to be a doula. And I think it's wonderful. I have someone in my life that's going to have the baby in 2 months and will not be going to a hospital. So of course, shout out to the doulas. Lumumba, you're now the director of partnerships with Movement for Black Lives, but could you tell people what is Movement for Black Lives? I think most people have heard of it. I think that it's just like writing white papers and policy, but can you tell us your role in it and also what Movement for Black Lives is so that our audience can hopefully join if they're part of an organization?
That would be absolutely great. So the Movement for Black Lives is a national ecosystem of radical Black organizations that are rooted in a queer Black femme politic that we're actually approaching 5 years in existence right now. We have a website, and I welcome everybody to go check it out and figure out how you can plug in www.m4bl.org and see what we have happening. More recently, we have been doing some more urgent work around the COVID-19 pandemic and trying to figure out how we can keep our community safe. As Monifa had mentioned earlier, our mantra is, who keeps us safe, we keep us safe. But prior to that, we've had a very ambitious agenda as to what it is we're trying to do in the electoral arena, within grassroots organizing. But we came on the scene after the Ferguson uprising, where a number of key people figured out that we needed to create a platform and a process for national organizations and people who want to support to be able to come in and provide support. And this particular platform was significant because it centered the community, the Black community and people of Ferguson, and allowed for their particular perspectives, demands, and organizing objectives to be elevated and amplified. And that particular model was used not just in Ferguson, but also in Baltimore, in Charleston, and a number of other initiatives where our people took to the streets. So M4BL really is an ecosystem that allows for our community to come together and figure out how we can advance our struggle. One of the more significant things that M4BL has been able to provide has been the vision for Black Lives that Monifa has been a part of and working. And this particular document and platform has been very important with expressing what our demands are, what our organizing North Star actually is, based on very particular areas. So from issues around education, what it is we want, issues around criminal justice, what is it do we want, issues around reparations, what do we want. And the reparations piece has been built out even further, and people really should look at the website to download the reparations toolkit so people can get a real clear sense about what it actually is, how it applies, how people can utilize it as an organizing tool, and be clear about what it is not, because I think the presidential campaign has really bastardized the concept of reparations, and people have been just really totally misusing it. And so we are a very broad but powerful networking coalition of folks, and we welcome people to go again to the website www.m4bl.org.
Well, you know, when the platform came out, and when I mean a platform, I don't mean 2 pages. I mean 10 issues with very specific policy remedies. I downloaded it, and you know, because I'm crazy like this, maybe, but I also think good like this. Let me step away just for a second.
Rosa keeps everything, y'all, just so you know.
And this would be my Movement for Black Lives policy agenda. I take it with me on the road. Well, I won't be speaking at colleges too much, but I downloaded every one.
Yes.
So people are like, we don't have an agenda. I'm like, what are you talking about? There's 200 tabs on Movement for Black Lives right now. And also including Black diasporic people. That's if you're Afro-Latina, Latinx, if you're from Brazil, if you're from Cuba, we're in the document, you know, but we're part of it. It's not an add-on as it is a collective of.
And so, if that's not enough, it's actually being expanded further now. So right. So by the end of this year,
binder on how to get this dude out of office
and how we build something in replace of that. Absolutely.
Right. Because not only do we have, you know, that's what happens in revolutions. When we throw out the dictator or the megalomaniac, you have to be ready to govern. And I do believe, like groups like Dream Defenders and Mi Gente and Movement for Black Lives has every policy prescription ever. So no one could say, what do you want? We're clear on what we want. I mean, the fact that reparations even came up in a presidential debate, you're like, all right, this is interesting, right? Like we're pushing that. But before we wrap up, what are some things that you could let people know, especially maybe people that are isolated? I'm thinking about people who are, you know, they live by themselves in an apartment, and like, what are they going through? Or are they writing the best, greatest novel for us? But what would be your advice to people on how we should be organizing in the time of COVID?
I'll say a few things, and I'll let Monifa jump in as well. We have recognized that our communities are our safety, right? And so we really want to highlight that people need to make sure that even beyond this, the only way that we can make sure that we maintain our safety, our health, is by building healthy, holistic communities, right? And so we really encourage people to start where you are. Hit up your tenant association. If one doesn't exist, start one, right? But also for folks who are in some of these remote areas, in a few months, we'll be kicking off our M4BL app. And it's going to be an app that you can download on your phone that will allow you to actually get some very basic organizing 101 tools. And it'll also allow you to be able to see how close you are to other people who are a part of our ecosystem. And so people have some very real ways to plug in. And then there are a number of other resources that are on our website, and we encourage people to go check that out. But the most valuable resource are our member organizations. Find out who they are. See where they are in the country. If you are close to them, join them. If you are not, figure out how you can start a chapter of one of their organizations. But really, we have a very rich and powerful grouping of organizers that have been able to do some amazing things and will continue to break down a number of barriers and build new ones as we move forward.
I love that. I love that there's an app. It's like contact tracing for organizers.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is.
Yes,
I'm like, I'm down the street right now. Who's around me ready to throw it down?
Right. And lastly, when you go to the website, you'll also see that we're also providing small grants for people who are doing mutual aid within COVID. So if you're scraping up nickels and dimes to feed people, hit us up. We might be able to get you some resources.
I already hit you up, so y'all know y'all.
Right.
I already hit y'all up. But yeah, no, I think also that it's been really dope to see collectives funding artists and people who are 1099 gig workers, because we're, by the grace of Bernie Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez, we now could file for unemployment. But people don't realize how many of us are 1099ers, and we are gig economy workers. So it's been great to see Movement for Black Lives provide services to so many other organizers. And Monifa, from your perspective, what should people be doing and thinking about right now?
You know, there's so much, but I'm just going to shout out one thing, which is the national bailout. Within the epicenters of the COVID crisis, prisons are the epicenters within the epicenter. Right now, there are about 25,000 people who are incarcerated in jails and prisons across the country that have tested positive for COVID, and the number of fatalities is approaching around 400. Mm-hmm. So it's huge rate of mortality within prisons from the amount of people who are testing positive. So if you can support members of our ecosystem, like the national bailout, they're trying to bail out Black mamas, people who are vulnerable all over the place. If you search them and go to their website, you can contribute to national bailout, and through them, you will contribute to local bailouts throughout the country. So if there's one thing I wanted to shout out, is that because we've got to decarcerate, otherwise these already unsafe, unhealthy jails, prisons, and detention centers will turn into death camps.
Thank you for saying that. Now I'm going to have to bring you all back pretty soon, because where the hot spots are beginning to show up is either at meat plants or within the prison system, or the entire incarceration system, which includes juvenile detention, federal prisons, and jails like Rikers. And we know that the numbers, they're lying, they're not safe. We live here in New York. Monifa and Lumumba are based in Brooklyn, New York. I'm here in Albany. Our governor was made people incarcerated make hand sanitizer, but then banned hand sanitizer for the people who made the hand sanitizer. So the conditions are horrific, and people are dying every day. And in Illinois right now, Cook County Jails is the highest hotspot right now. We're going to continue to see that, unfortunately. So we're going to have to bring you back for that. But I really first want to thank you, Lumumba and Monifa, for being here. You're like my guiding lights and my truth tellers. And I'm just glad we're in collective family and community. And the work you do and the example you've been setting for consistency, is 100%. So thank you. I love y'all. Thank you for coming.
Love you too. Thanks for having us.
Of course.
Peace.
Peace. Okay, everybody, let me see. So look, fam, I'm doing the Instagram, but now we got to end it. We got to figure this out. Instagram's got to figure it out. We're going to share it, and then we're going to get Nana up in here. So we have that. All right. Hopefully this works. Let's go live again. All right, because I don't know what I'm doing. Okay. Sorry about that. This is our second show. You know what? We're going to set up a Patreon site if people want to support us doing this. The more support we get, the more people we could hire to run all our social media and things like that. But like I said earlier, right now, my little sister, Janita Castro, check out the work she does at her business Humanity, where she does digital communication strategy. And she's so busy, she can't take me on as a client. So I find that very interesting, sis. I have to wait in line to be a client because you're too much work. But I'm so glad to have and end the show today with Nana Gyamfi, the executive director for Black Alliance for Just Immigration.
Hey, hi. It's so good to see you. I'm glad to be here. You're looking fabulous.
Okay. Nana Gyamfi is the executive director of Black Alliance for Just Immigration, BAJI, the largest Black-led social justice organization representing the nearly 10 million Black immigrants, refugees, and families living in the U.S. A movement attorney for the past 25 years, Nana is co-founder of Justice Warriors for Black Lives and Human Rights Advocacy. She has served as the executive director of the Black Women's Forum, co-founded by Congresswoman Maxine Waters. She serves as its president. Nana is also a foreign professor in the Pan-African Studies Department at Cal State, Los Angeles. She has repeat appearances in documentaries and other media, including Tales of the Grim Sleeper and Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman. She also hosts her own weekly radio show, Conversations on the Way, the Asafo edition. Also, Nana defended me and my fellow comrades, 6 of us, in Black Lives Matter for LA. And I'd love to start with this because this trial happened in March 2017, people. So the year before, we shut down the 101 in California with 6-7 people the day before Thanksgiving. And I love the picture from the helicopters where you see all the traffic backed up for 5 miles. Like we did that with like 7 people. And now it's like, we're going to go to trial. It's going to be like 3 days. Our trial was 27 days.
That was not my fault. That was the fault of the jurors.
No, that's the whole point. I want to say this was not the fault of Nana, but to pick a jury took like 2 weeks.
Yes.
And then we were there 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, literally on misdemeanor charges. And why I tell that story, especially now, is, well, I'm a storyteller, so I'm always going to tell stories, but let me let you know that, man, did they want us to plead guilty. Oh, yeah. And when we didn't, they kept extending it. And we were so tight, and Nana was on point as a people's lawyer, like, we are not pleading guilty. And I remember one night we went out to dinner. None of us was saying plead guilty. We were just talking. And she said, Nana, you said to us, do you know that Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King never went on trial? And that was part of your closing argument, which is one of the best ever. And we're like, yo, that's right. Like, they never went to jail. Why the hell are we sitting here on trial for 27 days, you know? But not only did she defend us successfully, she's dope. I call her all the time. I'm like, Nana, what am I supposed to be doing? So, Nana, if you could tell us some of the work that BAJI is doing, but also give us a little bit about international stuff maybe happening in Brazil or Ghana or Nigeria, because you travel and you have a lot of comrades from those countries, to kind of get an internationalist perspective.
Well, I think in terms of just focus, in general, BAJI does, as you know, a lot of types of work. So we are focused on criminalization. We are part of and one of the lead orgs in the movement for Black Lives. And it was lovely to see Lumumba and to see Monifa, doing their thing. That's always fabulous. But so we do that, and we work on abolition. We work on getting people out of detention. We add this immigrant aspect to everything that is being done, because immigration detention is also a cage. And as we see with COVID-19, also very much disproportionately impacted by what is happening in those cages as Black immigrants. So we do that work. We do permanent protection work. So when you hear people talking about undocumented folks in this country, you rarely hear them talking about Black undocumented folks. But we are here, 600,000 strong. And many of us are not eligible for DACA because there's all these exceptions, carve-outs for, criminal cases, even if it's on the misdemeanor level, and other ways that we are denied access, mainly because we're Black people. And so we're profiled by this system in different kinds of ways. We look at economic protections. We look at protections with respect to legal and representation, as well as trying to get folks out of these detention centers, jails, and prisons. We're part of national bailout, for example. And then we also are doing a lot of the civic engagement work with respect to census and advocacy work, pushing back against the criminalization of Black people. We work to educate, organize on behalf of Black immigrants, but we also work with multi-generational African Americans, with our folks in the colonized worlds of Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, etc., to, defeat white supremacy, patriarchy, and capitalism. A lot of what's happening here, we also look, because we come from other countries, including the Brazils and the Honduras, right, as Garifuna, for example, as
Right.
well as the continent and other parts in the Caribbean. We look at the ways in which capitalism, anti-Blackness, white supremacy, as well as patriarchy affect us in similar ways wherever we are in the globe. And so I tell folks, when you look at, for example, with COVID, these stimulus checks, Black immigrants were not allowed to get the stimulus checks.
Yeah.
And Puerto Ricans and Black folks that are African American are not getting the stimulus checks, right? Even though technically you're allowed. And
Yeah.
so you're entitled. And so we see those similarities, and we're working to push back, doing a lot of mutual aid in this country. And we can talk about that, as we're having this discussion, but it's that kind of dismantling and building what we want to see type of work.
Yeah, I mean, I actually, next week we will be having Carmen Yulín Cruz, the mayor of San Juan, on the show. And I was just talking to her earlier today, which to this day, Puerto Ricans have not received a stimulus payment, even though a second round might go out, and we have to be ready to admit that the conversation around undocumented people and immigrants, not by the organizers or the activists, but by the media, has completely left out Black undocumented immigrants, people from Haiti, people from Brazil, Nigeria, Ghana, Somalia. And you can't even find in the left or progressive media spaces, what the hell, we're not including over 600,000 people, particularly Haitians that like every 6 months have to deal with a threat of being deported, so what is the work that BAJI is doing right now with COVID-19, especially knowing, as we all should know by now, that almost everybody that's incarcerated within the immigrant detention complex system is just in there, and they're not even trying to let one out on what they call modified house detention and all of that kind of stuff.
So we're doing, I would say, 3 big pieces. One piece is the detention piece. So on the advocacy level, we're pushing and pressing with our partners. Sometimes it's less partners than other times, to really put the getting folks out of detention on the map, and doing it in a way that focuses on Black people, but also that connects it to the original abolition work that's rooted in the work of multi-generational African Americans and Puerto Ricans, right? And so Free Em All is about African American and Puerto Rican political prisoners.
Right.
Somehow, other folks who are not Black in this immigrant rights movement have come up with this Free Them All, like this is a new concept, and it is completely disconnected from its roots. And so we are doing the work of not just pushing to free them all, meaning everyone, including our elder political prisoners, but also making that connection, making sure the immigrant rights movement does not forget that it must be a racial justice movement that pushes against anti-Blackness in all its forms, if it's going to actually be the human rights movement and movement for justice that it claims to be. And so we're doing that work. We're also doing mutual aid. I know, Rosa, that you've heard about the project when people were bailing folks out of Rikers, bailed over 100 people out. BAJI was part of that work, not just in helping to coordinate the bails, but also in providing the support services. So we carried the support services part to make sure people were picked up at Rikers, that they were taken to a location. We provided temporary housing for people that needed a place to quarantine, provided food resources, etc. Where that didn't happen, just as an example, people were arrested at the bus stop at Rikers. If they didn't have a ride, the police would come back and rearrest them for new charges, knowing they had just been released on bail, right? Rearrest them to cause them to try to get them to be put back in, knowing that Rikers, as you know, we talked about Sing Sing, these prisons, jails, and detention centers are nothing but petri dishes for this COVID-19, which was brought into these places by the guards. Like, this is not something that started in the places. This was brought in by the guards, but who has to suffer without PPE while they're making PPE, whether it be hand sanitizer, masks, etc., are the people that are locked in the cages there. So we're doing the work of mutual aid, we're doing the work of getting folks out, and then we're doing the work of trying to press to have our people protected who are being separated. Our families are being separated. They are telling parents that are in detention that they need to sign to let their children out, and we know they're going to be adopted and taken into the abyss. There's a lot that's happening right now, and we're trying to be right at the forefront of it all.
And how is LA looking like right now, since some places are about to reopen?
So LA so far is closed. I mean, there's murmurings, and you can tell that they want to reopen, that they are getting a little bit antsy. My son was telling me earlier that he's hearing some things from some officials behind the scenes about them trying to slowly begin to reopen around June 4th. Right now, we're still in shelter in place, allegedly. Of course, you have to have a place to shelter, but that's another story. Enforcement is an issue, Rosa, that we've talked about. You and I have talked about it personally. I've been talking about it as well. We are seeing more videos of the police that are taken by folks in the hood, of the police running up on our folks in parks, on the sidewalk, in front of the projects, and arresting people, throwing them on the ground, throwing them against cars. About masks, doing the same in Skid Row, predominantly Black area, without masks on. These cops, half of them don't have masks on while they're engaging in all this non-socially distanced assaulting, traumatizing, arresting of our people. And so that's a big issue. They're talking about contact tracing, but haven't explained to us where the data is going, who's going to have access to the data, and what enforcement orders are going to come out of that.
I want to ask you about that, because one of the books I'm going to recommend at the end is called The Surveillance of, the Age of Surveillance Capitalism, right? And I'm like, everything that they want us to do, from contact tracing to getting your tests, they want us to do through an app, right? Which is now really opening up, particularly civil liberties around freedom of movement, but also I think there's something that the feds are trying to pass that would give them access to cell phones without the companies needing to give them permission. And we are now in that time where the more information we share, it's now surveillance.
Right.
Like,
you have to be concerned about the data.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, we're asking directly in conversations, even with one of the good governors, right? Like your so-called good governor, Newsom, who's just as good, which is bad, basically. And, we asked the question about data, and they were like, oh, well, we're not going to give it to ICE, and we're not giving it to the police. And I was like, okay, but who has access? We're not giving it. Don't tell me again who you're not giving it to. I want to know who can get it.
Right.
And who can share it. And we still to this day do not have an answer to that question. Just talked to someone 2 days ago, still don't have an answer, which I find to be very troublesome and disturbing. So if you look outside, it's a gorgeous day outside. It doesn't rain in Southern California, allegedly. But in terms of what our people are going through, the level of economic loss, over half of LA County is unemployed. Many of them are not going to be employed again. Many of them are Black folks, multi-generational African-American or Black immigrant, as well as other immigrant groups that are not going to be getting any kind of recovery, relief, that are going to be enforced on without the government assisting folks with masks, assisting folks with other forms of PPE, but still holding them to the standard of having to have it. So we can see, looking down the road, that we got us, we keep us safe is going to, are going to have to be the mantras that we're using to protect our people and provide them with relief.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the new stop and frisk is social distancing, right? Like before it was, we'll stop you, you might be gang related. Now it's like, you're wearing your mask, but you're not wearing it right. And
yeah,
I mean,
literally, that's what they did in Jesse Owens Park. They just rolled up on brothers they normally would roll up on and try to get their gang affiliation, but instead your mask is under your nose.
Right.
Or it's not covering your chin completely.
Yeah, and how is BAJI looking at organizing in this time? Because I think we're beginning to hit the wall around Zoom calls and, because look, as an organizer, your DNA compels you to be out in the streets, right? Like, and we're now being told to stay home. And then we take that seriously because as people who haven't been tested, I would feel horrible knowing I pass this on to my sister or a comrade or my mom and dad who I haven't now seen in 3 months, until I get tested. So you're living in a house full of people who are organizers and activists, or you're there with your crew. And do we continue to stay home, or are we going to be able to find a way to, I guess, socially distance protests?
Yeah, so I think it's going to be both. There's going to be two things. The mutual aid piece, Rosa, is really important in this. The capacity to be out and to hand our folks some groceries, to hand our folks some toiletries, to help our people with, those face-to-face type of things, PPE, etc., especially in the mutual aid context, because we always ask the question, is there anything you can do to help? And we're finding that there are people that were bailed out that we provided support for that are now doing their own organizing around those issues, right? So it's not just charity. It's like, here's the political education, right? We're sticking that in the bags and we're having conversations. So in a way, it's deepening our organizing work because we're actually talking to people flesh to flesh in real life, obviously safely, socially distantly, but in a way where we're building relationship and trust. And then I think we do have to start saying, let's do some of these protests in socially distanced ways. And I think people are coming up with motorcades and people are actually getting out of the cars, but staying 6 feet apart. So there's different ideas. And if there's anyone that can come up with what to do, it is us, Black folks, right? We are going to come up with
I've even seen, I don't know where the protests were, where they did circles 6 feet apart. And they tell everybody who's protested or in support of this protest, stand in your circle. In case the police even want to come, like you can prove by the circle that you're 6 feet apart. So Dana, before I let you go, you're a graduate of Cornell University. I am one too. I, would like you to just talk a little bit about Dr. Turner, because in Africana Studies at Cornell, in fact, last year we were so blessed to be able to celebrate 50 years of Dr. James Turner beginning the Africana Studies Research Program, its own independent academic field. And a lot of us have gone through that are comrades now, but going from Cornell, you kind of got this thing about being a people's lawyer. But what specifically at Cornell did Dr. Turner wisdom, what did he tell you you were supposed to do once you graduated? I know
the thing was that you were supposed to start it before you graduated, so you had no choice. It was like the natural progression.
I'm not coming up here unless I know you.
Exactly. But really, the connection to the people. The thing with Dr. Turner is that, yes, he is super brilliant. He is super suave. You ain't gonna find a brother who is better dressed in the finest, the best of our culture, right?
He never raises his voice.
Never raises his voice, right? But his love for the people has an intensity that comes through not just his eyes, but his every pore. Like when he is talking about what we need to do for the people and the commitment that we need to have, that soft and calm voice that he has a sharpness and a bite about it. And so, you know, in talking to us, right, he always reminded us that there was a role that we were supposed to be playing that was a serious role, you know? And so even though we were at college and, you know, I used to tell my son before he went to college, when you're at college, you think that you're doing all this deep work. And for most people, they're not doing all this deep work. Well, if you were one of the Turner students, you actually got the opportunity to do deep work and to learn, you know, to begin to learn the lessons that deep work teaches you, and to connect that to your heart's desires, right? And so, but you know, it was clear before I left. I remember my father; he was actually pretty jealous because I'm a daddy's girl, and he could not understand why Dr. Turner had this capacity to get me to do all these things, right? And to be involved and concerned about all these things that he was sure I was going to go to prison for if I didn't stop, just because he came to the United States in the late 60s, you know, when the Panthers were being killed and jailed, and he felt like, hey, this is going to lead down the road to perdition, right? But that was the kind of profound understanding that I got from Dr. Turner, Dr. James Turner.
And if anybody out there has heard the word scholar activist or is a scholar activist, that's because Dr. Turner created that as not only a theory, but a very applied practice within Africana studies, you know. And I think it's important in this time, while we are having a little extra time, what we're beginning to see in higher education as they cut back. First, they're cutting back on what they call discretionary spending, which is like no speakers like me. So we're not, but also the first departments they have chosen to cut in some of these systems are what? Ethnic studies, Black studies, Latino studies, Asian studies, women's studies, you know? And we were so, like I said earlier, so blessed last year to be all together to celebrate Dr. Turner. And I literally know what he would be telling us right now. And he has been telling some of us that we gotta do more than we've done before. And we have to be very vigilant in this kind of reimagining of higher education that is not just leaving many people out, but is really beginning for folks to question, like, what's the purpose of me going to college if there are no jobs? And Dr. Turner has answers for all of that. So Nana, just give out the information for BAJI, because I really want to make sure that people who are supportive of undocumented people, that we not forget, particularly what would be called the Black diasporic, undocumented and immigrant communities in the United States.
Thank you so much. Folks can go to baji.org. That's spelled BAJI.org. So that's our website. You can follow us on Twitter at BAJI Tweet. You can follow us on Instagram at InstaBAJI. And between those three, you can grab us on Facebook as well. Between all of that, you'll be in the know. And, you know, we're hopeful that people don't think that organizing is still not happening, that advocacy is still not happening. Join up, and we've got plenty of work to do on the path of Black liberation. Thank you, Rosa, for having me on. Appreciate you.
Nana, thank you. You know, always, I love you so much, and thank you. And, you know, you hold it down in LA like only you and a couple other people I know could do. And everybody, again, go to BAJI, support the work that they're doing, and let's stop not including African diasporic Black people in the conversations of undocumented immigrant work, you know, we got to keep a sharp eye on that right now. So thank you, Nana. Thanks for joining us. Love you, sis.
Thank you. Love you. Bye. Thank you.
Okay. Well, first I want to thank everybody. Usually a show like this would be 57 minutes, but I don't want it to be 57 minutes. So, you know, our show might go a little bit longer than an hour or not. I'm trying to also be respectful and cognizant of so many other organizers and activists who are doing things like this. But what we want to do is each show will either feature 2 or 3 books. So today I have 2 that I really want to feature. One is almost 1,000 pages. It will take you a while to get through. But the first book is called The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, The Fight for a Human Future at the New Frontier of Power. So as you see in our banner, here's the book. Here's the writer. It's a lot. It's gonna take weeks to go through. But the main theory that she's arguing in this book is that we are already in this era of surveillance capitalism, and that a lot of new jobs that are going to be created in the United States of America, but throughout the world, will be people who are there to surveil us through an app or heat-seeking thermostat, or we've seen in Spain and a couple other European countries where they're actually sending out like robots or drones that will tell people they're not socially distancing. So we need to really be aware of that. And we've decided that we are going to highlight every time we do this show a political prisoner or prisoner of war in the United States of America. The book I want to recommend right now, the introduction is by Assata Shakur, and the prefatory note is by William Kunstler, one of the most incredible people's lawyers. He passed a while ago, but he dedicated his life to being a people's lawyer to Black Panthers, Young Lords, the Weather Underground, the American Indian movement. And with that, I want to show this book here, Hauling Up the Morning, which has political prisoners either writing poetry or speaking about their story. And as we want to highlight a political prisoner every night that we do the show, today we want everybody to know who Leonard Peltier is. And we will continue to highlight the organization that really does incredible work, or the most forward work in the United States. It's thejerichomovement.com. Again, that is thejerichomovement.com. And as you can see on the screen today, we want to highlight Leonard Peltier. Not only he should be out just because he should be out, because these are all trump-up charges. He's been in prison for over 40 years as a political prisoner. But, you know, I want people to be cognizant every day. When you see Michael Cohen, a convicted felon, and I will call him that, who worked with 45, was released today because the judge said he's older and he could be more susceptible to catching COVID-19. Also, Paul Manafort, another of Trump's criminal syndicate, has also now been released, and they can stay at home. I really want people to think about what that means. These people who corrupted an entire election and government are being let out by federal judges. But meanwhile, someone like Leonard Peltier, or all the political prisoners and prisoners of war we will continue to talk about, are literally in jail for fighting for us to be free. And Leonard Peltier was one of the leading organizers in the American Indian movement, right? So when we say free them all, we mean free them all. You know, so check out thejerichomovement.com. As well, check out the RAP, Release Aging Prisoner Population in New York. It's a New York-based organization that's on it every day, so that anyone over 65 should be released in this time of crisis. Unfortunately, Governor Cuomo and his people has spun a narrative of a very good governor and being very altruistic. But New York State, he as governor has not let one person out of any incarceration system here in New York. So we would like to first thank all of you for joining. Please share this on your platforms. I want to thank our guests, Lumumba, Monifa, and Nana. I want to thank my producer, Tandi, who has been doing incredible production before, but we're rolling here. And I'm so excited that everyone that's doing this show is a woman Black Afro-Latina woman. And earlier I had mentioned my sister, Janita Castro, and her firm, Humanity, for helping us with all our digital media strategy. I said it before, she's my little sister, but really like age-wise, but in our family, she's still the head of the family. And so check out her work. And I really thank everybody for watching. So please share Disrupt the Chaos. I want to thank all the sponsors right now that we have. If you want to sponsor, hit me up at clementerosa@gmail or DM me. But right now, Youth of X, Mokata, which is the Museum of Contemporary African Diasporic Arts, and as well as V-Day, the movement to end violence against women and girls. Those are sponsors. So if you want to be a sponsor, hit me up. If you want to donate, go to rosaclemente.net where all of this will be uploaded. And we will see you next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 7 p.m. I'm really excited about next week because we are going to have on the mayor of San Juan, Carmen Yulín Cruz, but we're also going to have a graduate of Cornell University who became a doctor in Cuba and is now an ER doctor at Jacobi Medical Center. It's Dr. Joaquin Morante, and I'm gonna have him on for the whole hour so we can take questions if anybody has about how they can keep themselves safe. So until we see you again, stay up, stay safe, stay healthy. See you in the whirlwind and organize. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
They don't want you to know the truth.